Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something really fundamental.
We really are. We're pushing right up against the edges of how we understand
Yeah.
reality, consciousness,
Yeah.
the big stuff.
Yeah, exactly. We're diving into the thinking of Federico Faggin. Now, you might know him as, the inventor of the first CPU, the touchscreen, a giant in tech history.
Absolutely. But for the past few decades, he's turned that incredible mind towards consciousness, towards philosophy, really.
And we're focusing today on his theory, right? Quantum Information Panpsychism.
That's the one. Our main source is a really detailed YouTube interview with him from the Essentia Foundation. We'll also touch on his book, Irreducible, and some related papers.
And the goal here is to really get into the arguments, a serious look aimed at a college-level understanding.
Precisely. A rigorous examination, not just skimming the surface.
What I find so fascinating is Faggin's path. He built the digital world, practically.
Right, you'd expect him to be the ultimate materialist, maybe.
Exactly. But his journey into consciousness wasn't just like an intellectual puzzle. It started with something deeply personal, didn't it?
It did, about 30 years back. A really profound experience that basically shattered his existing worldview.
Okay, so let's start there. That sounds like the key to unlocking his later thinking. What
Sure.
actually happened?
Right, so it was Christmas, 1990. He was at Lake Tahoe. And despite all his success, the CPU, everything, he felt deeply unhappy.
A kind of existential dissatisfaction.
Seems like it. And then boom, out of nowhere, this incredibly intense experience. He described it as feeling unconditional love just pouring out.
Pouring out.
Yeah, and accompanied by the sensation of brilliant white light right from his chest area.
Wow. That's not your everyday feeling. But it wasn't just emotional, was it? He described a shift in awareness, too.
Exactly. That's crucial. He felt like he was simultaneously the observer and the thing being observed.
Okay, hold on. Observer and observed. But he still felt like himself.
Yes, he kept his sense of identity, Federico Faggin. But at the same time, he had this powerful realization that everything, himself included, was made of this fundamental stuff.
This underlying essence.
Right. And the feelings that came with it were just overwhelming love, joy, peace, but also, critically, an intellectual insight.
Which was?
That this stuff, this fundamental consciousness or whatever it was prior to matter. It came first.
Okay, that's huge. That flips the usual script completely.
Oh.
Matter arises from this stuff.
That was the insight.
Yeah.
And it completely changed his focus. He shifted from thinking within materialist physics to trying to understand consciousness as the foundation.
So that experience becomes the bedrock for his whole theory then, the core idea being.
The consciousness isn't something that just pops out of complex matter like brains. It's not emergent in that classical sense. Instead, he argues it's fundamental. It's a basic constituent of reality, maybe like energy or space-time itself. Foundational.
And he uses that drone analogy to explain it, right?
Yeah, it's a helpful picture, I think. He says, imagine the body is like a sophisticated drone.
Okay, a complex machine.
A very complex machine, sure. But it's being operated, piloted, by a conscious quantum field.
So the consciousness isn't in the drone, the body. It's the pilot, the field controlling it.
Precisely. And this has big implications for things like qualia,
Qualia, the raw feeling of experience, like seeing red or tasting salt.
Exactly. Those subjective feelings, Faggin argues, don't happen solely inside the brain's wiring. They exist within that conscious quantum field that's interacting with the body.
So the brain is more like an interface. Or an antenna, maybe?
Something like that. It processes signals, translates them for the field, but the feeling itself is in the field. And this led him, after decades of thinking, to another really radical conclusion about math.
Oh, right. You mentioned that. What was it?
He concluded that mathematics, the language we use to describe the universe,
The bedrock of physics.
is actually created by consciousness.
Whoa. Okay. So math doesn't describe a pre-existing reality independent of mind.
In his view, no. Consciousness generates mathematical structures to understand itself and its manifestations. And if that's true...
Then you can't fully explain consciousness using mathematics.
Exactly. Because consciousness is the source. The creator can't be fully contained or explained by its creation.
That really does invert the usual scientific picture. It puts consciousness right at the base.
Fundamentally. Which leads us straight into the quantum realm, because he's adamant consciousness is a quantum phenomenon.
But not just standard quantum mechanics. He thinks we need to go further.
Yeah, he feels existing quantum brain theories don't capture it. We need to think beyond, Schrodinger, Dirac, get into quantum fields and specifically quantum information.
Okay, quantum information. This seems like a linchpin for his whole argument.
It absolutely is. And this is where his work connects with another physicist, Giacomo Mauro d'Ariano.
D'Ariano, right. What was his contribution?
D'Ariano did this groundbreaking work showing that you can derive the basic rules of quantum physics just from postulates about quantum bits, qubits.
So instead of starting with waves or particles, you start with information.
Exactly. It suggests that quantum information isn't just describing the quantum world. It might be the quantum world, the fundamental stuff, ontology, not just epistemology.
Wow. Okay, so information as the ground of reality. How does Faggin weave that into his consciousness theory?
Well, he saw d'Ariano's work and they collaborated, wrote a paper together. Faggin expands on it hugely in his book. Their core idea is this.
Yeah.
Quantum information is the representation of inner experience, feelings, thoughts, sensations.
Yeah.
They are quantum information in these conscious fields.
Okay. And what about free will? Where does that fit?
This is maybe the most radical part. They propose that the collapse of the wave function
The moment a quantum system snaps from possibilities to a definite state.
is actually an act of free will, exercised by the interacting conscious quantum fields.
Seriously. So measurement isn't just passive observation, it's a choice. At the quantum level.
That's the proposal. It's a potential solution to the measurement problem and a theory of consciousness and free will all rolled into one.
If that holds up, that's a paradigm shift of monumental proportions.
Absolutely. It potentially unifies physics and the philosophy of mind in a way that's completely new.
Okay, let's dig into some other related concepts he uses. He talks about part whole and reality being holographic.
Right. So he pictures each individual conscious entity, you, me, maybe even an electron, as a field.
A conscious quantum field.
Yes. And this field is simultaneously the observer, the thing being observed, and the actor making choices.
Okay.
But here's the kicker. These fields don't exist in spacetime, like objects in a box.
Then where?
He flips it. Spacetime emerges from the interactions and the self-knowing of these conscious fields. Spacetime is within consciousness, not the other way around.
That's hard to grasp. How does the part-whole idea connect?
He uses the analogy of a biological cell. Every cell in your body has the complete DNA blueprint for the whole you, right?
Yeah, the whole genome.
So, in a way, the part contains the information of the whole. Faggin suggests something similar happens with consciousness. Each individual conscious field, each part, somehow contains or reflects the whole, the totality of existence.
Like a hologram where every piece contains the whole image.
Exactly. That's the holographic principle connection, this part-whole pattern repeating at different scales. It implies a really deep interconnectedness.
And he contrasts this with, say, a microprocessor to make a point about information.
He does. He says, look at a biological cell. It's operating with both quantum and classical processes. It's a part whole. Now look at a microprocessor.
Purely classical, basically on-off switches.
Right. And a single transistor has no clue about the whole computation. It doesn't contain the whole program. It's not a part whole in that deep sense.
But computers use materials that have quantum effects at the base level, don't they?
Sure, the silicon atoms obey quantum laws. But in a classical computer, those quantum effects are incoherent. They average out. A classical bit, a 0 or a 1, is just a macroscopic average of underlying quantum stuff. It's lost that quantum richness.
So the key difference is the nature of the information.
Precisely. Classical information, like in your computer, can be copied perfectly. Bits are bits.
But quantum information
Cannot be perfectly copied. That's the no cloning theorem, a fundamental rule. And Faggin argues that meaning exists intrinsically within the quantum fields, within that uncopyable quantum information.
Whereas classical bits are just symbols, meaningless in themselves.
Exactly. Materialism tries to build meaning from meaningless bits, which Faggin thinks is backwards. Meaning, he suggests, is inherent in the quantum reality associated with consciousness.
Okay, this loops back to free will and the wave function collapse again.
It does, because if consciousness and free will are fundamental, not emergent,
Then maybe they explain quantum mechanics rather than the other way around.
that's his argument. Take consciousness and free will as postulates, as self-evident truths from our own experience. Then things like the no-cloning theorem, the probabilistic nature, maybe even the collapse, start to make sense because of these foundational principles.
So the collapse isn't just random chance.
It's a choice. A free will decision made by the interacting conscious fields. That's why quantum mechanics is indeterministic at the single particle level, but predictable statistically for large numbers.
Individual choices averaging out into probabilities.
Oh, okay.
That's a really different lens on quantum physics. What about the feeling itself, the qualia? How does that relate to the quantum information?
He says the quantum information can represent the feeling. It's the structure, the description.
Like a mathematical description of redness.
Right. But the actual experience of red, the raw feeling, that exists only within the conscious field itself, it goes beyond the representation.
The map isn't the territory.
Exactly that analogy. Math, quantum information, that's the map. The feeling, the qualia, that's the territory. And you can't fully capture the territory on the map.
And he uses Olivos's theorem here.
Yeah, to underline the limits. All of those prove you can only get one classical bit of information out of a single qubit reliably.
Which suggests trying to describe the infinite richness of, say, a sunset with classical bits is, well, fundamentally limited.
Precisely. The inner world is vastly richer than classical descriptions can handle. He uses another metaphor, too.
Which is?
Consciousness as the author writing a book.
Okay.
Space-time. Our bodies. The physical world.
Hmm.
Those are like the sentences in the book. Or maybe the movie playing on the screen of our perception, their manifestations within a deeper reality.
And that deeper reality is consciousness itself.
Yes. The author, the field, the underlying awareness.
This obviously puts him in direct conflict with standard materialism or scientism. What's his main critique there?
Well, he points out the obvious. After 100 years, physicists still can't agree on what quantum mechanics actually means within a purely materialist framework.
All the different interpretations. Copenhagen, many worlds.
Right. Everett's many worlds. Bohmian mechanics. It suggests the materialist framework itself might be the problem. He says, why not start with what we know most directly?
Our own consciousness, our own sense of free will.
Exactly. Take those as self-evident postulates, like axioms in geometry, and build from there. See if that makes sense of the physics.
And he challenges the idea of emergence, right? Getting consciousness from non-conscious stuff.
Very strongly. He argues it's logically impossible in a purely classical context anyway. How do you get more consciousness, free will, from less unconscious deterministic matter? It violates a kind of conservation principle of qualities.
You can't get something from nothing.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
He also hints that maybe clinging to materialism is partly about wanting control, wanting a predictable clockwork universe, even if that doesn't match reality.
So if we ditch that and embrace quantum information as the fundamental reality, what does that look like?
Based on DiRino's work, the qubit becomes the basic unit of reality. Not just 0 or 1, but this sphere of infinite possibilities, this superposition.
Which collapses to 0 or 1 only when measured,
Right.
or when a choice is made.
Right, and that collapse is probabilistic for any single event. Physics gives us the odds, but can't predict the specific outcome for one qubit. It's fundamentally indeterministic at that level.
Faggin sees this framework as a way to bridge science and, well, spirituality, doesn't he?
Yes, very explicitly.
Yeah.
He wants to heal that split between the outer world of science and the inner world of meaning, experience, consciousness, free will, the stuff spirituality and philosophy often deal with.
How does he propose to do that?
He offers a new fundamental postulate for a theory of everything, basically.
Okay, what is it?
The totality of what exists is dynamic, holistic, and wants to know itself.
Wants to know itself. That sounds almost alive, purposeful.
It's meant to. He links wanting directly to free will and intrinsic drive, and knowing itself is linked to consciousness, the capacity for awareness. He argues these are self-evident properties of existence.
And this single postulate, he thinks, can explain quantum physics.
That's the claim. That starting from this axiom about a conscious, self-knowing totality can make sense of quantum weirdness in a way that starting from mindless matter hasn't managed in a century.
Okay, but any scientific theory needs to be testable, right? Falsifiable. Does he offer predictions?
He insists it is testable and does make predictions. And he gives a really concrete, potentially mind-blowing example.
Which is?
He predicts that trees are conscious.
Trees. Like oak trees, pine trees, conscious.
In some form, yes. He actually plans to conduct experiments and try and demonstrate this. If he could, it would completely overturn the idea that consciousness needs an animal brain.
That would be. Revolutionary is an understatement. But he must know that sounds incredibly far-fetched to most scientists.
Oh, absolutely. He compares it to quantum entanglement. Remember how Einstein called it skooky action at a distance? It took decades and huge resistance before experiments forced people to accept it. He expects similar resistance here. Paradigm shifts are hard.
Speaking of shifts, what about AI? Given his background, what's his take on AI potentially changing everything?
It's interesting. He thinks real paradigm shifts come from changing how we understand ourselves, our own consciousness, not just from smarter machines.
So AI isn't the revolution he's focused on.
Not in the fundamental sense. He actually suggests the current paradigm, scientism, might hit its limit when AI claims to be smarter than us. Because AI, he argues,
Lacks something crucial.
yes, it lacks genuine, non-algorithmic creativity and, more importantly, conscious understanding. AI can generate stuff, maybe even beautiful stuff, but it doesn't know it's beautiful or meaningful.
It needs a human consciousness to recognize the value.
Exactly. For true insight, true innovation, you need that conscious spark. He's also a bit worried AI development is all about making money, not helping us understand ourselves better.
He quotes Nikola Tesla, doesn't he, about studying non-physical phenomena.
He does. Tesla said science would make more progress in a decade studying the non-physical than in all previous centuries. Faggin clearly resonates with that.
It points to the primacy of consciousness again. Thoughts shaping reality.
Yeah, the idea that the inner world, thoughts, intentions, consciousness comes first and shapes the outer material world, not the other way around.
And if consciousness isn't confined to the brain, that opens up exploration of things like out-of-body experiences.
He certainly suggests those kinds of phenomena become more plausible, more worthy of serious investigation if consciousness is fundamental and not just brain activity.
So where does this all lead? What's the ultimate vision or hope driving this work for him?
His ultimate dream, really, is a shift towards cooperation.
Cooperation. How does that follow from consciousness being fundamental?
If we have the direct experience of our interconnectedness, the realization that we are both observer and observed, part of one whole, then cooperation becomes the natural way to interact.
Instead of competition, like survival of the fittest.
Right. He sees survival of the fittest as a pretty bleak and probably inaccurate view of life's purpose. If we know ourselves as interconnected consciousness, the drive to compete based on scarcity and separation should diminish. Cooperation arises naturally from that shared identity.
This connects to his idea of the one and the many, and these things he calls sety.
Exactly. The one, the totality wanting to know itself, creates differentiated parts to experience itself from many perspectives. These parts are the sety.
Like cells dividing. Mitosis.
That's the analogy he uses. And he notes Leibniz's monads as a historical parallel. A syad, for Faggin, is specifically a conscious field that has free will and that intrinsic drive to know itself.
So it's different from just any quantum field.
Yes. A regular quantum field, like the electromagnetic field, shares physical traits but doesn't have consciousness or free will in his model. Syeds are special. They are units of consciousness.
And qualia, the felt experiences.
Qualia are the doorway into the inner world of the syad. The meaning, the deeper significance, resides there beyond what current physics describes in what we might call metaphysics for now.
And he thinks this framework might even help with big physics problems, like unifying quantum mechanics and general relativity.
He suggests the difficulty there might be, because our basic concepts, time, space, matter, energy, are wrong, or at least incomplete, because they leave out consciousness.
For instance, his idea about space.
Yeah, that space is the memory of the self-knowing of one. And the universe expanding exponentially is because the one is knowing itself more and more over time.
That's a very different cosmology. And what about death? Revisiting the drone analogy.
Right. If consciousness is the pilot and the body is the drone, what happens when the drone breaks?
The pilot is still there.
Potentially, yes. Consciousness is no longer getting signals from that specific drone, no longer focused through that physical body. So it might perceive a much wider reality, unfiltered by biological senses.
Which could relate to near-death experiences, people reporting consciousness while the brain is offline.
He sees NDEs as potential suggestive evidence for exactly that consciousness independent of brain function. He even briefly mentions the possibility of other bodies, astral, etheric things, sometimes discussed in esoteric traditions.
And he takes this down to the particle level, electrons as syeds.
He speculates, yes, that perhaps even fundamental particles are rudimentary syeds, conscious fields using their quantum properties to interact and communicate.
But doesn't that run into the combination problem? How do little consciousnesses combine to make a big one like ours?
That's a standard challenge for panpsychism, yeah.
Yeah.
But Faggin argues his quantum information in panpsychism avoids it.
How so?
Because quantum states don't just add up linearly. When quantum systems combine, they create new entangled states that are genuinely more than the sum of their parts. They have new properties, new information.
So complex consciousness emerges naturally from the way quantum information combines, not by just sticking little minds together.
That's the idea. Quantum entanglement provides a natural mechanism for integration and the emergence of higher-level unity without losing the parts entirely.
It sounds like this view also implies a sense of purpose for individuals.
He certainly feels that way personally and suggests it might be true more broadly, that we are born with a purpose, perhaps unique perspectives for the one to experience reality through.
The universe thinking to itself through us.
Kind of, yeah. And he imagines it through communication and resonance, maybe a deeper kind than just exchanging classical information via screens. Individuals can connect.
And form new, higher-level conscious entities.
Without losing their own individuality.
Yeah.
A kind of conscious synergy. That's a very different picture of collective consciousness than usually imagined.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, we've explored Faggin's quantum information panpsychism, consciousness, and free will as fundamental.
Quantum information as the stuff of reality representing inner experience.
The part-whole holographic nature of things, space-time emerging from consciousness.
And the huge implications for physics, life, death, maybe even the purpose of the cosmos.
It's undeniably radical stuff, really challenges mainstream assumptions.
Hugely. But it's coming from someone with serious scientific and technical chops. It's not just hand-waving.
So we really encourage you, the listener, to, sit with these ideas, consider this alternative perspective that tries to bridge the inner and outer worlds.
It's a lot to take in, but potentially incredibly rewarding to think about.
And maybe that leaves us with a final thought, a question for you to ponder. If Faggin is even partially right, if consciousness is fundamental,
how did that change everything?
Yeah.
How should science proceed? How should we use technology? What does it mean for who we are?
What new questions open up if we start taking the inner world, consciousness itself, as seriously as we've taken the outer material world?
Big questions. We definitely recommend diving deeper if this sparked your interest. Check out Faggin's book, Irreducible, the interview, the papers.
Keep exploring these deep mysteries. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.